Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations. In my video about stubborn RF in the shack, at least one commenter remarked on something that I neglected as a possible cause or aggravating factor for RF in the shack and, in fact, RFI in general. And that can happen with any kind of antenna, not just a ladder line fed dipole antenna. If you have any metallic object in the vicinity, whether it be a part of your gutter in your house, whether it be a stovepipe like the one behind me, or even pieces of electrical wiring, segments of electrical wiring in your house, or even metal plumbing, metal pipes. If anything like that is in the vicinity of your antenna, and it resonates at the frequency on which you're operating, usually an integral multiple of 1/2 of a wavelength will produce resonance in a metallic object like that. 1/4 of a wavelength sometimes, but 1/2 of a wavelength always. It has to be an electrical wavelength, but it's just a coincidental length for a piece of metal, as I said, a pipe or a wiring. And what it'll do is it'll resonate at the operating frequency that you're using. And it'll pick up that signal and make an excellent receiving antenna. It's not connected to any receiver, so what does it do? It re-radiates the signal. Now, not that much of it. It's not like it takes your full signal and re-radiates it. But it can distort the radiation pattern of an antenna. It can produce RF manifestations in places where you don't want it. And for example, it can interfere with home appliances. It interfered with, well, something like along those lines interfered with my keyboard keyer way back in the 1970s. But nowadays, with so many things microcomputer controlled and so many personal computers around, havoc is almost inevitable if you run high power on a certain frequency and there's a metallic object in the vicinity of that, of the device or your antenna, either one, that is susceptible to radiation from on any RF frequency. And some of the worst cases can be downright dangerous. Medical equipment, for example. And so you have to be very careful when you're operating your radio at high power that you don't get any RFI complaints from neighbors, or none of the devices in your house malfunction that cause you any great inconvenience. I get around that problem simply by running low power. 10 watts RF output on CW and 7 watts RF output on PSK 31. There are radiation exposure guidelines for the human body, and I checked those out. If you look at all the regulations, if you followed all the regulations and examined them all, I mean, you'd be a nervous wreck. You wouldn't have any time to operate your radio because you'd have to make sure that you weren't breaking any rules or going to cause any havoc somehow. But on certain frequencies, certain metallic objects can resonate and cause problems with nearby devices, particularly nowadays because we have microcomputers and sensitive electronic equipment that reacts to RF in ways that the old-fashioned tube type equipment didn't do. So with that thought, you can go to bed tonight thinking that some regulation, you're violating some regulation somewhere, somehow. And not only that, but you could be causing some horrendous interference to some device somewhere that's critical to human life. And that though spills over into another topic that I'll get into that's related to hurry sickness. And it's called worry sickness. If you can't think of anything to worry about, then you ought to be really worried, because something's obviously radically wrong if you're not worried about anything. So you better start worrying. That's for some other video though. This one is just an explanation for some of the peculiar and mysterious things that happen when you key up a high-powered ham radio transmitter. Stangibelisco W1GV saying 73, and so long, which, regardless of transmitter power or antenna type, regardless of objects in the vicinity, always translates to, in my native fist, did-da-da-da-da. To be clear, did-da-da-da-da.